You think prison food is just mystery meat and watery mashed potatoes? You're only seeing half the story. Behind bars, from the 1920s through the 1980s, inmates created an entire underground cuisine using nothing but commissary items, contraband ingredients, and pure, desperation-fueled ingenuity. We're talking about elaborate meals cooked in trash cans, desserts baked on radiators, and flavor combinations that would shock a professional chef. So lock yourself in and prepare for a different kind of hard time, because we're about to reveal 25 authentic prison recipes you never knew inmates were actually creating from 1920s to 1980s. Number 1. Pruno, prison wine. Let's start with the most legendary prison creation of all time. Pruno, the infamous prison wine that's been fermenting in cells since Prohibition. In 1925, at San Quentin State Prison, inmates discovered that the fruit cocktail served at dinner could be transformed into alcohol if left to ferment. They'd save their fruit servings for weeks, add sugar packets stolen from the mess hall, and hide the mixture in a plastic bag behind the toilet, where the warmth helped fermentation. The process took 7 to 10 days. Inmates would burp the bag daily to release gases, risking discovery with every check. The smell was unforgettable, a sickly sweet, rotting fruit odor that guards learned to recognize immediately. But the reward was worth the risk. Homemade alcohol in a place where any escape from reality was precious. By the 1960s, Pruno production had become an art form. Alcatraz inmates claimed they could make drinkable wine in 5 days using oranges from the mess hall, and ketchup packets for extra sugar. The ketchup addition sounds insane, but desperate men make desperate innovations. Pruno caused multiple outbreaks of botulism in California prisons during the 1970s. Several inmates died, but production never stopped. The recipe just evolved to be slightly less deadly. Number 2. The spread. In the late 1970s, when instant ramen became available in prison commissaries, inmates invented what would become the most important dish in prison cuisine, the spread. Folsom Prison, 1978. An inmate nicknamed Cheese supposedly created the first spread when he couldn't stomach another plain ramen packet. He crushed up chips, mixed in the ramen noodles with hot water from the shower, added squeezed cheese from his commissary, and created something that actually resembled real food. The innovation spread through the California prison system faster than a riot. Soon, every cell block had its own spread variations. The base was always crushed ramen noodles mixed with hot water, but inmates added whatever they could get: summer sausage, pickles, chips, cheese, hot sauce, tuna, beans from the mess hall. The communal aspect made spreads special. Inmates would pool their commissary purchases, creating elaborate spreads that fed 6 or 7 men. It wasn't just food, it was social currency, gang bonding, and one of the few ways to exercise choice in a place designed to eliminate it. By the 1980s, spread making had become so sophisticated that inmates wrote recipe cards traded between facilities. A good spread recipe was worth 3 packs of cigarettes. Number 3. Jailhouse Tamales. During the 1940s in Texas state prisons, Mexican-American inmates created an ingenious method for making tamales without masa or corn husks. Huntsville State Prison, 1943. With many Mexican-American men incarcerated during wartime labor shortages, the prison population included experienced cooks who refused to forget their cultural foods. They couldn't get masa, but they could get corn chips from commissary. The process was elaborate and required coordination. Inmates would crush corn chips into powder, add hot water and a bit of contraband lard saved from mess hall biscuits, forming a paste that approximated masa. The filling was whatever meat they could acquire, usually bologna or mystery meat from dinner, mixed with hot sauce and pickle juice for flavor. Without corn husks, they improvised with notebook paper soaked in water. The tamales were wrapped, then steamed in a trash bag suspended over hot water in a trash can. Guards knew what was happening but often looked the other way. Tamale days meant calmer cell blocks. The taste wasn't authentic, but the act of making them was. These improvised tamales represented cultural identity, maintained against all odds. In 1947, a Huntsville guard wrote a letter to the warden praising the Mexican boys for their cooking, noting that tamale-making days had fewer incidents. Number 4. Radiator Cake. During the Great Depression, Sing Sing Prison in New York became famous for an unlikely creation: cakes baked on steam radiators. Winter of 1932. An inmate named Dutch Schultz, not the famous gangster, just an unfortunate name coincidence, worked in the prison library and had access to a powerful steam radiator. He mixed together crushed graham crackers from commissary, powdered milk stolen from the kitchen, sugar, and water into a batter. The challenge was temperature control. Radiators were unpredictable, too hot, and the cake burned, too cool, and it stayed raw. Dutch wrapped his batter in layers of damp newspaper, then placed it on the radiator for hours, rotating it like a rotisserie chicken. The result was a dense, sweet cake that became legendary. Dutch started taking orders, charging 2 cigarettes per slice. His operation ran for 8 months before guards shut it down, but not before the technique spread to 5 other cell blocks. By the late 1930s, radiator baking had evolved to include cookies made from crushed vanilla wafers and butter, and even brownies made with crushed chocolate cookies and contraband cocoa powder. The warden's wife allegedly tried a piece of radiator cake at a prison reform meeting in 1934 and declared it surprisingly edible. Number 5. The brick. In the early 1970s, inmates at Stateville Correctional Center in Illinois invented a protein-dense survival food they called the brick. During a period of severe overcrowding and reduced meal quality, inmates needed portable, high-calorie food that wouldn't spoil. An ex-Army cook, serving time for robbery, created the brick by crushing peanuts from commissary, mixing them with honey packets, powdered milk, and crushed granola bars, then compressing the mixture into a dense block wrapped in plastic. The result looked like a brown brick and had the texture of concrete, but it packed serious nutrition. A single brick could sustain a man for a full day. Inmates made them before being transferred to new facilities, knowing they might miss meals during transport. The brick became essential during the 1971 Stateville riots. Inmates who'd stockpiled bricks could hold out longer during the standoff. Prison authorities eventually banned peanuts from commissary, specifically because of brick production. The recipe appeared in a contraband prison cookbook that circulated through Illinois facilities in 1973. The cookbook was written in code, with bricks referred to as protein packages to avoid censorship. Number 6. Sweet Lightening, potato whiskey. While Pruno was made from fruit, Sweet Lightening was the countryside prison's answer, made from something more readily available: potatoes. At Angola State Prison in Louisiana during the 1950s, inmates working the prison farm had access to unlimited potatoes. A former moonshiner serving time for illegal distilling saw opportunity. He created a fermentation setup using stolen potatoes, sugar, and a crude still made from pilfered copper tubing. The production was more dangerous than Pruno. The still required heat, meaning contraband electrical heating elements or small fires, both serious violations. The fermentation took 3 weeks and produced a clear, powerful alcohol that inmates claimed was stronger than vodka. The operation ran for 2 years before being discovered in 1957. Guards found gallons of sweet lightning hidden in the barn. The ringleader got additional prison time, but the recipe had already spread to farm prisons across the South. The taste was reportedly terrible, like rotten potatoes mixed with nail polish remover. But in a place where any alcohol was contraband gold, nobody complained about flavor profiles. Number 7. Prison pizza. The 1980s brought an innovation that would revolutionize prison cooking: the microwave in common areas. With it came prison pizza. Rikers Island, 1983. When microwaves were installed in the day rooms, an inmate named Martinez created the first documented prison pizza. He used a flour tortilla as the base, covered it with crushed tomato soup mix moistened with water, added sliced summer sausage and cheese, then microwaved it until the cheese melted. The innovation spread through the entire facility within weeks. Inmates began competing to make the best prison pizza, adding jalapenos from commissary, pepperoni from care packages, even pineapple chunks from fruit cups for the controversial Hawaiian version. Prison pizza became social event cooking. Inmates would gather around the microwave, watching their creations cook, trading tips on cheese distribution and temperature timing. Guards reported that pizza nights had fewer fights. Men were too focused on perfecting their recipes. By 1985, prison pizza had evolved to include deep dish versions made in plastic bowls and stuffed crust varieties, with cheese rolled into the tortilla edges. The creativity was genuinely impressive. Number 8. Chi-Chi fried ramen patty. Before spreads dominated prison cuisine, inmates at San Quentin invented Chi-Chi, a fried ramen creation that predated modern prison food culture. In 1977, a resourceful inmate acquired a contraband immersion heater, a device that could heat water or oil when plugged into an outlet. He mixed crushed ramen noodles with water and seasoning packets, formed the mixture into patties, then fried them in corn oil bought from commissary. The result was a crispy, savory patty that was substantial enough to feel like real food. Chi-Chi became the predecessor to more complex prison recipes, proving that ramen could be more than soup. The operation was risky. Immersion heaters were serious contraband, and using one required lookouts to watch for guards. The oil would burn if left unattended, creating smoke that triggered alarms. But the payoff was worth it. Chi-Chis could be sold for $1 each, paid in cigarettes or commissary credits. The name's origin is disputed. Some claim it came from the sizzling sound during frying. Others say it was named after a guard nicknamed Chi-Chi who confiscated the first batch but reportedly ate it himself. Number 9. Jail bread. Long before artisan bread became trendy, inmates at Leavenworth Federal Penitentiary were making sourdough from scratch. In 1962, a baker serving time for tax evasion couldn't stomach the industrial bread served in the mess hall. He started a sourdough culture using flour stolen from the kitchen, sugar from coffee service, and wild yeast from fruit. Maintaining the starter was challenging. It had to be hidden, kept at proper temperature, and fed regularly with flour and sugar. The baker hid his starter in a plastic bag behind his toilet, where ambient warmth kept it alive. The actual baking required even more ingenuity. He shaped the dough into small loaves, wrapped them in damp cloth, and steamed them in a makeshift double boiler setup using metal containers and hot water. The bread was dense but genuine, with that distinctive sourdough tang. Word spread, and soon the baker was trading small loaves for protection, commissary items, and favors. His operation ran for 3 years before transfer to another facility. He reportedly left his starter with a trusted inmate, and legend says that Leavenworth sourdough culture survived into the 1970s. Number 10. The melt. During the 1940s at Alcatraz, an inmate created the melt, a surprisingly sophisticated grilled cheese technique using contraband equipment. An inmate, nicknamed Iron Mike, worked in the prison laundry and had access to the heavy pressing irons used on sheets. He realized the hot iron could cook food. He'd sneak slices of bread and cheese from the mess hall, wrap them in cloth, and press them with the hot iron. The result was a perfectly pressed grilled cheese sandwich with crispy exterior and melted interior. The technique required precise timing. Too long and it burned, too short and the cheese stayed solid. Iron Mike's melts became famous throughout Alcatraz. He'd make them to order during laundry shifts, charging 2 cigarettes per sandwich. Guards knew something. They was happening, but couldn't prove it until they found melted cheese on an iron in 1946. The technique outlived its inventor. After Iron Mike was transferred, other laundry workers continued the tradition. By the time Alcatraz closed in 1963, the melt technique had spread to mainland prisons. The warden's report on the incident noted that inmates were defacing government property with cheese. Number 11. Sweet surprise, candy bar cake. In the mid-1970s, inmates discovered that melted candy bars could be transformed into surprisingly decent desserts. A juvenile offender at a Texas youth facility melted Snickers bars in hot water, then mixed in crushed graham crackers to create a thick paste. Poured into a cup and cooled, it solidified into something resembling fudge. The technique spread to adult facilities, where it evolved into more complex versions. Inmates would combine multiple candy bar types, Snickers for nougat, Reese's for peanut butter, M&Ms for color, creating layered desserts that looked almost professional. The process became a cottage industry. Skilled sweet makers would take orders for birthday cakes, anniversary gifts for wives visiting in conjugal units, and celebration desserts. Payment was always in commissary goods or services. A sweet surprise cake for a birthday could cost $5 in commissary credits, a significant sum in prison economy. But for inmates trying to maintain family connections or celebrate small moments of humanity, it was worth every penny. By 1978, the technique had evolved to include crushed cookies, powdered milk frosting, and even decorative elements made from Skittles. Number 12. Jailhouse Gravy. During the austere 1950s, when prison food was deliberately terrible, inmates at Folsom created a gravy that made even the driest bread edible. The recipe was born from pure necessity. Bread at Folsom was so dry and tasteless that inmates struggled to choke it down. A former Army cook mixed hot water with bouillon cubes bought from commissary, added salt and pepper packets, and whisked in a tiny amount of flour stolen from the kitchen to thicken it. The resulting gravy was thin and bland by restaurant standards, but in prison it was transformation. Poured over dry bread, it created something approaching sustenance. Over baked chicken from the mess hall, it was almost restaurant quality. Jailhouse Gravy became community property. Inmates would pool resources to make large batches in metal cups heated on makeshift burners. The cook, who could make the smoothest gravy, earned respect and protection. The recipe evolved regionally. Southern prisons added hot sauce and claimed it as Texas gravy. Northern facilities added garlic powder and called it Italian gravy. But the base remained the same: bouillon, hot water, and determination. A 1956 prison inspector's report mentioned inmates creating unauthorized sauce, but recommended allowing it since it reduced food waste. Number 13. The pad, prison pad thai. In the 1980s, as Asian American prison populations grew, so did culturally specific prison cooking. The pad was born at Terminal Island Federal Prison in California. In 1984, Vietnamese and Thai inmates at Terminal Island created a prison version of pad thai using commissary ramen noodles. peanuts, sugar, soy sauce packets from the mess hall, and lime juice from the medical unit. The technique required saving resources over weeks. Inmates would collect soy sauce packets from every meal, accumulate peanuts from commissary, and trade for sugar. The lime juice was hardest to obtain. Officially, it was for scurvy prevention, but inmates would fake symptoms to get the medical unit to dispense it. The cooking happened in collective sessions. Asian inmates would gather in a cell, pooling resources and creating enough pad to feed 8 or 10 men. The atmosphere was part of the appeal, men speaking, Vietnamese or Thai, laughing, telling stories from home while creating food that reminded them of freedom. Prison officials initially viewed these gatherings with suspicion, thinking they were gang meetings. But a guard who'd served in Vietnam recognized what was happening and convinced administration these were cultural preservation, not conspiracy. The pad became a bridge between cultures. Black and Latino inmates would trade to get invited to pad nights, experiencing flavors completely foreign to them. Number 14. Poke, prison jailhouse version. Hawaii's prison system contributed its own innovation, a version of traditional poke made with commissary fish sticks. Halawa Correctional Facility. 1972 native Hawaiian inmates refused to let incarceration separate them from their culture. Traditional poke requires raw fish, but prison didn't provide that. Instead, they used baked fish sticks from the mess hall, torn into chunks. The marinade was ingenious. Soy sauce packets saved from breakfast trays, sesame seeds picked from hamburger buns, green onions grown in contraband window boxes, and chili flakes from the commissary. The fish sticks were marinated overnight, transforming their breaded, processed nature into something that echoed real poke. It wasn't authentic, but it was sacred. Making poke was an act of cultural defiance. Guards who understood Hawaiian culture learned to look the other way when they smelled sesame and soy sauce coming from certain cells. The recipe spread beyond Hawaiian inmates. By 1975, poke nights were multi-ethnic affairs, with men from different backgrounds sharing in this adapted tradition. The cultural exchange that happened over bowls of improvised poke was remarkable, men teaching each other words in Hawaiian, sharing stories of home, finding common humanity. One inmate wrote in his journal, "The fish sticks taste nothing like ahi, but making poke makes me feel like myself." Number 15. Prison Cheesecake. In 1965, an inmate at Rikers Island created what remains one of the most impressive prison desserts: no-bake cheesecake. The inventor was a former restaurant pastry chef serving time for embezzlement. He couldn't bake in prison, but he understood the chemistry of cheesecake. Using cream cheese from commissary, crushed graham crackers, sugar, and lemon juice from the medical unit, he created a mixture that set firm when refrigerated. The crust was pressed graham crackers and melted butter saved from breakfast. The filling was whipped cream cheese mixed with sugar and lemon juice. Without refrigeration in cells, he'd wrap the cheesecakes in plastic and hide them in the coolest part of the building near the concrete floor in the corner. The cakes took 8 hours to set properly. During that time, the chef would guard them obsessively, knowing that a bumped container could ruin hours of work. Prison cheesecakes became celebration items. Inmates ordered them for birthdays, release dates, and to welcome new arrivals. A full cheesecake cost $20 in commissary credits, expensive, but worth it for a taste of real dessert. The chef ran his operation for 3 years, producing nearly 100 cheesecakes. When released, he claimed prison cheesecake was his most popular creation ever, more beloved than anything he'd made in restaurants. Number 16. The Hookup, Chili Spread. Texas prisons in the 1980s elevated the spread concept with the hookup, a chili-based version that became legendary. At Huntsville in 1982, inmates created the ultimate comfort food spread. The base was canned chili smuggled from the mess hall or bought through commissary when available. Mixed with crushed Fritos, cheese, sour cream when possible, jalapenos, and hot sauce, it became something approaching real Tex-Mex. The preparation was ceremonial. Inmates would heat the chili using contraband immersion heaters, layer in the Fritos for crunch, add cheese to melt, and top with whatever additions they could acquire. The result was served in a communal container, with each participant using chips to scoop their portion. Hookup nights were social events. Men would contribute ingredients, tell stories while it cooked, and share the meal together. The communal eating was powerful in a place designed to isolate and dehumanize. Sitting together over a shared meal was resistance. The name came from prison slang. Hooking someone up meant doing them a favor. A good hookup was exactly that, someone sharing what little they had to make life more bearable. By the mid-1980s, hookup recipes had regional variations across Texas prisons, with each unit claiming theirs was authentic. Number 17. Sweet Tooth. Condensed milk candy. During the Depression era, condensed milk became a prison commissary staple, leading to an entire category of candy making. At Attica in 1934, inmates discovered that condensed milk, when mixed with sugar and cooked slowly, transformed into fudge-like candy. The technique required patience and a heat source, usually hot water from the bathroom tap, run continuously over a metal container. The candy maker would stir for hours, waiting for the mixture to thicken and caramelize. The result was incredibly sweet, almost toothacheingly so, but in a place where sweetness was rare, that was the point. Variations emerged quickly. Adding cocoa powder created chocolate fudge. Crushed peanuts made peanut butter cups. Some inmates even added instant coffee for mocha flavor. Sweet tooth became major currency. A piece of good fudge could buy protection, pay debts, or secure favors. Talented candy makers had prison jobs easier because other inmates wanted them healthy and able to produce. A 1938 Attica report noted that condensed milk sales through commissary had quadrupled in 4 years, with investigators unable to determine why until they discovered the candy operation. Number 18. Jailhouse Burrito. New Mexico State Penitentiary in the 1,970 seconds produced the most authentic prison Mexican food, including elaborate burritos. The 1970s New Mexico prison population was heavily Latino, including men who'd worked in restaurants and home kitchens. They refused to accept that prison meant abandoning real food. The burrito required extensive planning. Tortillas from commissary, beans saved from dinner, rice hoarded over multiple meals, cheese, hot sauce, and any available meat, usually summer sausage or bologna. The assembly was art. Beans spread evenly, rice layered for texture, cheese and meat distributed for balance. The heating method varied. Some inmates used contraband hot plates, others wrapped burritos in wet cloth and steamed them on radiators. The goal was getting everything hot without the tortilla breaking. What made these burritos special wasn't taste alone, it was the fact that Latino inmates taught non-Latino cellmates how to make them properly. White inmates from rural areas learned to fold tortillas correctly. Black inmates from urban areas discovered flavor combinations they'd never tried. The recipe became cultural education. Making burritos together broke down racial barriers that riots and lockdowns never could. Number 19. Bang prison coffee liqueur. While Pruno was fruit-based alcohol, Bang was coffee-based, invented at Joliet Correctional Center in Illinois during the 1950s. An inmate working in the prison canteen had access to institutional-sized containers of instant coffee. He discovered that mixing large amounts of instant coffee, sugar, and water, then letting it ferment for weeks produced a dark, bitter alcohol with caffeine kick. The fermentation was tricky. Coffee fermented differently than fruit, producing alcohol slower and requiring more sugar. The smell was also distinctive, not sweet like Pruno, but sharp and acidic. Hiding Bang required more creativity. The effects were unique. The alcohol provided intoxication while the caffeine kept you alert, creating a wired, drunk feeling that inmates called being banged up. It was popular for all-night poker games and when inmates needed to stay awake during early morning work shifts. Production was risky. The fermentation took a month, and the containers had to be hidden and checked regularly. Discovery meant disciplinary segregation and additional charges. But for inmates desperate for any altered state, the risk was worthwhile. Bang production continued into the 1970s before coffee restrictions made it nearly impossible to accumulate enough instant coffee to ferment. Number 20. Prison Parfait. The 1980s brought yogurt to prison commissaries, and with it came an unexpectedly sophisticated dessert. At a women's facility in California, an inmate created layered parfaits using commissary yogurt, crushed cookies, and fruit from the mess hall. Layered in clear plastic cups, they looked almost restaurant quality. The technique spread to men's facilities, where it became a way to impress during conjugal visits. Inmates would prepare elaborate parfaits, timing them to be fresh when visitors arrived. The visual appeal mattered in a gray, brutal environment. Colorful, layered desserts were psychological relief. The parfaits evolved to include granola when available, honey drizzles, and even whipped cream made from powdered milk beaten with sugar. Some inmates created fruit compotes by cooking down canned fruit with sugar, adding layers of complexity. Prison parfait making became competitive. Inmates would show photos to other facilities during transfers, spreading techniques and inspiring variations. The pride men took in their parfait presentations was touching in a place that stripped dignity, creating something beautiful mattered. By the late 1980s, commissary reports showed yogurt sales had increased 300% in facilities where parfait making was popular. Number 21. The Sampler, Meat and Cheese Plate. Attica inmates in the 1960s created the Sampler, an improvised charcuterie board made entirely from commissary items. During family visiting days, inmates wanted to serve something that felt civilized. They'd arrange summer sausage slices, cheese cubes, crackers, pickles, and whatever other commissary items could be made presentable on plastic plates. The arrangement mattered. Inmates learned to fan the summer sausage, stack cheese artfully, and arrange crackers in patterns. These weren't just food, they were attempts to provide normal family experiences in abnormal circumstances. Wives and children visiting would see their incarcerated family member had prepared something special, that they'd thought ahead and tried to create hospitality despite circumstances. The emotional impact was profound. The sampler became tradition in multiple facilities. Inmates would help each other prepare them before visits, trading tips on presentation. The act of arranging food carefully was therapeutic control over something, anything, in a controlled environment. Guards largely tolerated samplers because visiting days with special food had fewer incidents. Happy families meant calmer visiting rooms. Number 22. Prison Sushi. Asian inmates at Terminal Island Federal Prison pushed prison cuisine boundaries with improvised sushi in the mid-1970s. Making actual sushi in prison seems impossible, but resourceful inmates found ways. Rice from the mess hall, fish sticks torn into strips, and nori made from dark green vegetables, pressed and dried, created something that approximated sushi rolls. The rice preparation was crucial. Inmates would cook extra rice, hide it, then season it with vinegar and sugar saved over weeks. The vinegar came from salad dressings, the sugar from coffee service. Without proper nori, they experimented with lettuce leaves, spinach pressed into sheets, and even dark green vegetables, dehydrated and pressed. None replicated real nori, but they provided the structural support roles needed. The soy sauce and wasabi came from the mess hall, Asian food night, hoarded over months. Creating a single sushi night required collective effort from a dozen inmates saving ingredients. The cultural significance was immense. Japanese and Vietnamese inmates teaching each other their versions, Korean inmates contributing their techniques. The sushi nights became multicultural celebrations of Asian identity maintained against assimilation pressure. One inmate wrote, "The fish stick sushi tastes nothing like home, but making it brings me closer to who I was before this place." Number 23. Corn Dodgers. In 1920s Southern chain gangs, inmates created corn dodgers, a survival food that kept men alive through brutal work conditions. Chain gang prisoners in Georgia worked all day in killing heat with minimal food. An ex-slave cook, still called by inmates in the 1920s for his traditional recipes, taught younger inmates to make corn dodgers, simple cornmeal mixed with water and salt, formed into patties and fried. The simplicity was survival. Ingredients were available, preparation was quick, and the result was portable, filling food that could be eaten cold during work breaks. Guards allowed it because well-fed inmates worked harder. The corn dodgers were dense, bland, and barely edible, but they provided crucial calories. Inmates would make batches at night, wrap them in cloth, and carry them during the next day's work. The tradition continued into the 1930s Depression era, when many free citizens were eating similarly simple foods. The difference was choice inmates made corn dodgers from necessity, not nostalgia. Corn dodgers represented continuity with enslaved people's foodways. The recipe traveled through generations, kept alive by cooks who refused to let their culinary traditions die even in chains. Number 24. Swole Balls, protein supplements. As prison bodybuilding culture grew in the 1970s, inmates created Swole Balls, high-protein snacks for gaining muscle mass. At San Quentin in 1974, an inmate who'd been a competitive bodybuilder created protein balls using commissary peanut butter, oats saved from breakfast, powdered milk, honey, and any available protein powder. The recipe was nutritionally sound. Peanut butter provided protein and fat. Oats gave complex carbohydrates. Powdered milk added calcium and more protein. Mixed together and rolled into balls, they were portable, muscle-building fuel. Prison bodybuilding was serious business. Men training with improvised weights needed proper nutrition. Swole Balls became essential for anyone serious about building muscle. The cultural aspect was fascinating. Bodybuilding crossed racial lines. Black, white, and Latino inmates would share Swole Ball recipes, spot each other during workouts, and discuss nutrition. The gym became one of the few truly integrated spaces in otherwise segregated prisons. By the late 1970s, Swole Balls had evolved to include crushed vitamins, wheat germ when available, and even brewer's yeast. Some recipes resembled legitimate sports nutrition products. Prison officials eventually restricted peanut butter quantities in commissary specifically because of Swole Ball production, claiming the high-protein snacks were being used to bulk up for violence. Bodybuilders argued they reduced violence by giving men constructive outlets. Number 25. The Last Supper, Execution Eve Meals. We'll close with the most solemn recipes. The improvised final meals. Inmates on death row created when official last meal requests were denied or unavailable. Throughout the decades, from the 1920s to 1980s, death row inmates sometimes had their last meal request denied as punishment or due to availability issues. In response, fellow inmates would pool their resources to create special meals for condemned men. At Sing Sing in the 1930s, when a cop killer's request for steak was denied, other inmates collected their meat rations for a week, then cooked them together in contraband fashion to create something approximating his wish. They presented it to him the night before execution as an act of solidarity. At San Quentin in the 1960s, inmates created elaborate spreads for condemned men, using every commissary item available. The preparation was sacred men who'd never spoken to the condemned inmate would contribute ingredients, recognizing the humanity and providing a final good meal. The condemned men rarely ate much. The gesture mattered more than consumption. In their final hours, knowing other inmates had worked together to provide comfort reminded them they hadn't been forgotten. These improvised Last Suppers represented prison culture at its most humane. Men who'd committed terrible crimes, living in brutal conditions, finding compassion for someone facing death. The recipes themselves varied, but the intention never did, providing dignity when the state had decided to take everything, including life. One death row inmate at Folsom in 1978 wrote in his final letter, "My official last meal was garbage, but what the brothers made for me, that was love. That's what I'll think about when they throw the switch." So there you have it, 25 authentic prison recipes created by inmates from 1920 through 1980. From Pruno to prison pizza, from Radiator Cake to Swole Balls, these weren't dishes taught in culinary schools or featured in cooking magazines. These were acts of creativity, defiance, cultural preservation, and simple human need for something better than institutional food. Were they legal? Rarely. Were they safe? Questionable at best. Were they authentic representations of prison ingenuity? Absolutely. The next time you complain about a restaurant meal or a slightly burned dinner, remember, your great-uncle might have been making tamales from corn chips. In a trash bag, or baking cake on a radiator, or creating sushi from fish sticks, and considering it the best meal he'd had in months. Like this kind of untold history? Subscribe, drop a comment, and tell us which recipe shocked you most.